The next call is a split call. Jan Logie, 5 minutes.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker, tēnā
koe.
koutou te whare. I rise as the Green Party spokesperson for local government to take a short call on the Resource Legislation Amendment Bill 2015. I do need to, I think, comment on the previous speaker and acknowledge and echo his sentiments of the importance of this piece of legislation. This is our primary environmental protection legislation, and without our environment, we have no economy. Without our environment, we have no well-being. And this legislation is absolutely essential to us as a country. And it does seem to be increasingly, I feel as if I'm standing up in this house talking to legislation and concerns about a sense of legislation being rushed and ill thought through, with many provisions that seem inconsistent and arguing against each other, with some things that might be good and some things that are fundamentally deeply concerning. And this is another piece of legislation exactly like that. And while our select committees are certainly not bowing under the load of work, and this government doesn't seem to be producing much legislation, increasingly what's coming to the House is of a very worrying level of quality. My colleague Eugenie Sage has already spoken and outlined a lot of our concerns around the environmental conservation impacts of this bill. So I'd like to focus my contribution on the democratic aspects of the bill. And of course we'll be very interested to hear from local and regional councils during the submission stage of this bill, and examining the many provisions that will impact and potentially erode their decision-making power. I want to acknowledge up front too that the bill will require local authorities to consult iwi authorities on the appointment of commissioners with an understanding of tikanga Māori, and it will require councils to invite iwi to form an iwi participation group early in the plan-making process. And this sounds good to us in principle. For this to succeed, however, it obviously needs to be sufficiently resourced so iwi can properly and professionally engage rather than relying on overstretched volunteers, as the Crown and Council so often seem to expect, sadly. But we definitely support these aspects of the bill, as it's clear that we need different structures to ensure mana whenua and matawaka's constitutional rights of participation in our local government. And we would support legislation with these provisions that didn't erode environmental and other democratic rights. So many of the changes at the heart for me as local government spokesperson of opposition to this bill is that it is giving extraordinary powers to the executive, to the minister, to be able to override local decision making. And to interfere in what seems like quite an ad hoc way, where we're not being even given kind of details of the philosophy behind when a minister might intervene. And democracy and care for our environment go hand in hand, as democracy and community building go hand in hand. There is a connection between democracy and sustainability, and that's never been clearer than in what happened with Environment Canterbury, where the elected councillors were removed from Environment Canterbury because the people of Canterbury started to vote for councillors who wanted to restrict the dairy sector. It's as simple as that. And that was stated pretty publicly by the Agriculture Minister at the time. So this government acted to override the concerns of the community, the environment, with their own agenda, and the agenda of profit over people and environment. So what this bill, some of the specifics is that are quite of concern, that may not seem so big on the face of it, but are of concern, is the smaller changes to improve the plan making may be worthwhile, but how the simple consents are defined as likely to reduce the council scrutiny. There's many aspects of this that are deeply worrying, Mr Speaker, and I hope they'll have scrutiny, proper scrutiny, through the select committee process.